Most people waste years trying to explain themselves to people who already decided who they are. And the terrifying part is, they never notice it happening. They think communication failed. They think they used the wrong words. They think if they could just speak more clearly, act more carefully, become more agreeable, then finally someone would understand them. But Carl Jung understood something darker about human nature. People rarely see you as you are. They see you as their mind allows you to exist. The moment you realize this, your entire relationship with people begins to change, because suddenly you notice something unsettling. Every social interaction contains two realities. The first is who you truly are. The second is the psychological role people unconsciously assign to you. And most people spend their entire lives trapped inside roles they never chose. The good son, the quiet friend, the funny one, the sensitive girl, the loser, the responsible one. Once a group decides your identity, every action you take gets filtered through that version of you. Even your growth becomes suspicious to them. Especially your growth, because people feel comfortable when your identity remains predictable. Predictability keeps social hierarchies stable. The moment you evolve beyond the role they assigned you, tension begins. You can see it in small things first. You become more confident, and suddenly people call you arrogant. You stop over-explaining yourself, and people accuse you of being cold. You create boundaries, and others quietly begin withdrawing from you, not because you became worse, because the version of you they benefited from is disappearing. People don't resent your weakness. They resent the possibility that you might outgrow them. Jung believed that human beings are constantly projecting unconscious material onto others, meaning most people are not interacting with you. They are interacting with their interpretation of you, their fears, their insecurities, their unmet desires, their private frustrations. And once you see this clearly, certain memories begin rearranging themselves in your mind. You remember moments where people misunderstood intentions you thought were obvious. Moments where kindness was interpreted as weakness, silence mistaken for insecurity, ambition mistaken for selfishness. You start realizing something deeply uncomfortable. Being understood was never fully under your control. Because understanding requires self-awareness, and most people are not self-aware enough to see beyond their projections. That's why some people will punish you for changing, not openly, psychologically. Subtly, their energy shifts, their tone changes, their support disappears the moment you stop fitting the character they created for you. And strangely enough, the more authentic you become, the fewer people feel comfortable around you. Because authenticity disrupts social illusions. Most relationships are built on mutual psychological agreements nobody talks about. I will continue being who you expect me to be, if you do the same for me. The moment one person breaks the contract, discomfort begins. This is why so many people feel exhausted after social interaction without understanding why. They think they are tired from talking, but they are actually tired from performing. Tired from managing reactions, tired from adjusting their personality depending on who stands in front of them, tired from carrying versions of themselves that no longer feel real. And over time, something dangerous happens. The false self becomes more socially rewarded than the authentic one. Jung warned about this indirectly through the concept of the persona, the mask developed to survive society. At first, the mask protects you. Then it imprisons you, because the more approval you receive for the role, the harder it becomes to abandon it. The nice person becomes unable to express anger. The strong person becomes unable to admit pain. The intelligent person becomes terrified of looking ignorant, and eventually people no longer relate to each other honestly. They relate to masks negotiating with masks. That's why so many conversations feel empty even when words are exchanged for hours. Very little truth is actually present. Most people are strategically presenting acceptable fragments of themselves while hiding everything that might threaten social acceptance. And the tragedy is, they often do this so long they forget who they were before the performance started. You can observe this in almost every social environment. Schools, families, friend groups, workplaces. Every system quietly rewards predictability. The person who behaves consistently becomes easier to categorize, and categorized people are easier to control. The moment someone changes unexpectedly, anxiety spreads through the group. Because transformation destabilizes unconscious social order. Think about how uncomfortable people become when someone suddenly gains confidence. Not performative confidence, real confidence. The quiet person starts speaking directly. The insecure person stops seeking validation. The people pleaser learns to say no. Suddenly the environment reacts strangely, not always with hatred, sometimes with jokes, distance, passive aggression, subtle exclusion. Because human beings unconsciously pressure each other to remain psychologically familiar. Kindness without boundaries quietly teaches people how to use you. And most people never realize how much of their personality was socially engineered through reward and punishment. As children, approval shaped behavior. Smile more, be polite, don't speak too loudly. Don't upset others, don't be difficult. Eventually, survival becomes tied to being accepted. So the mind develops a terrifying equation. If misunderstanding risks rejection, then authenticity becomes dangerous. This is where many people split internally. One self becomes visible, the other self gets buried underground. But buried does not mean dead. Jung called this buried part the shadow, and the shadow does not disappear simply because you ignore it. It waits, quietly, inside resentment, inside sudden anger, inside fantasies you never admit aloud, inside exhaustion that makes no logical sense. The more someone suppresses their authentic impulses for acceptance, the heavier the shadow becomes, until eventually they no longer know whether people love them or merely love the version of them that remains easy to digest. That realization changes a person. Because once you see it, you begin questioning every relationship differently. Who actually understands you, and who only understands the role you learn to perform for survival? At some point, a strange loneliness begins to appear. Not the loneliness of being alone, the loneliness of being unseen. You can sit in a room full of people who laugh with you, speak with you, spend years around you, and still feel psychologically invisible. Because deep down, you know they are interacting with a carefully edited version of you, not the real thing. And the disturbing part is, they may genuinely believe they know you. That's what makes this realization so isolating. Most misunderstandings are not accidental, they are structural. Human beings simplify each other to reduce psychological complexity. Your mind does it too. The brain creates compressed identities because fully understanding another person requires enormous emotional energy. So instead, people create symbols. He's insecure, she's difficult, he's successful, she's emotional. Once the label forms, the mind begins filtering reality through it. Evidence supporting the label gets remembered, evidence contradicting it gets ignored. This is why changing people's perception of you feels almost impossible. You are not fighting their opinion. You are fighting the stability of their internal world. Because if they misjudged you, they must also confront the possibility that they misjudge others, maybe even themselves. Most people avoid that realization at all costs. It's psychologically safer to reduce someone to a fixed identity than to accept human complexity. And this is where Jung becomes unsettling. Because Jung believed that what irritates us most in others often reveals disowned parts of ourselves. The arrogant person triggers hidden insecurity. The confident person exposes buried self-hatred. The free person reminds others of the prison they emotionally accepted years ago. This is why authenticity creates tension. Not because authenticity is offensive, but because it unconsciously confronts people with the parts of themselves they abandoned. People who suppress anger resent direct people. People who sacrifice their dreams resent independent people. People who built their identity around social approval secretly fear those who no longer need it. Most relationships don't end when respect disappears. They end when awareness appears. Once you notice these patterns, social interactions begin feeling different. You hear things beneath words, a compliment that sounds slightly threatened, concern that feels more like control, advice designed to keep you psychologically small, and suddenly you realize how much human communication is unconscious negotiation. People constantly test each other's boundaries, status, confidence, and emotional dependence without realizing it. Who apologizes first? Who seeks approval? Who tolerates disrespect? Who explains themselves too much? These small interactions silently determine power dynamics inside relationships. The person constantly trying to be understood often loses psychological leverage first. Because excessive explanation communicates something beneath language. Please validate my reality. And manipulative people sense this immediately. They learn that confusion weakens you, that withholding understanding gives them control, that if they keep questioning your intentions long enough, you will eventually begin questioning yourself. This is why some people leave conversations feeling strangely guilty even when they did nothing wrong. Their nervous system was pulled into defending an identity that was never being fairly examined to begin with, and the more emotionally dependent someone becomes on being understood, the easier they are to psychologically destabilize. There comes a moment in some people's lives where they quietly stop explaining themselves, not out of anger, out of recognition. They realize that constant self-justification is often a form of unconscious begging, begging to be seen correctly, begging to be interpreted fairly, begging to exist inside someone else's mind without distortion. But human beings are not neutral observers. They see through wounds, through ego, through fear, through envy, through desire. Even love itself can distort perception, especially love, because the people closest to you are often the most invested in the version of you that keeps their emotional world stable. A mother may unconsciously resist her son becoming independent because his dependence gave her identity meaning. A friend may discourage your growth because your old insecurity made them feel superior. A partner may claim they want honesty, until your honesty threatens the dynamic they emotionally relied on. People rarely realize the extent to which attachment shapes perception. Most are not seeing reality clearly enough for that. They are seeing emotional utility. Who comforts them? Who validates them? Who threatens them? Who reminds them of their inadequacy? And once you understand this, another realization emerges from the dark. Many people never wanted the real you. They wanted predictable access to the emotional role you provided. The listener, the rescuer, the entertainer, the obedient one, the damaged one. When that role disappears, their connection to you weakens, not because you betrayed them, because the unconscious transaction ended. This is why growth often feels lonelier than suffering. Suffering keeps relationships familiar. Growth changes the structure, and people become uncomfortable when they can no longer emotionally place you where you used to be. Notice how quickly others question your transformation. You've changed, almost always said with subtle disappointment. But change is the most natural thing about human existence. What people truly mean is, you no longer behave in ways that make me comfortable. That sentence alone explains countless broken friendships, relationships, and family tensions. Carl Jung once wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are, but he understood the hidden cost attached to that privilege. Becoming yourself disturbs people, because authenticity forces others to confront their own masks. A person who abandoned their dreams feels uneasy around someone pursuing theirs relentlessly. A person trapped in people-pleasing feels irritated by boundaries. A person emotionally dependent on external validation secretly fears those who can walk alone. Freedom exposes captivity, and human beings unconsciously resent reminders of prisons they chose voluntarily. This is why some people subtly attack individuality while pretending to care about you. Be realistic. Don't change too much. You're overthinking. You used to be different. The words sound harmless, but beneath them is often unconscious fear, because your transformation threatens the psychological agreements surrounding your old identity. And the darker truth is this: some people will only support your growth as long as it does not surpass theirs. The moment your confidence becomes undeniable, their warmth changes temperature, not always consciously. That's what makes it dangerous. Human beings can sabotage others while genuinely believing they are helping them. Once you fully understand this, your relationship with conflict changes forever. You stop assuming every misunderstanding can be solved through better communication, because some people misunderstand you strategically, others misunderstand you emotionally, and many misunderstand you because truly seeing you would force them to question themselves. That is the part most people avoid confronting. Understanding another human being requires the death of certain illusions. And once someone depends on outside understanding to feel psychologically stable, they become fragile. One accusation can shake them, one rejection can distort identity, one misunderstanding can consume their thoughts for days. Because their sense of self exists inside other people's perception. This is why Jung emphasized individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole apart from collective expectation, not socially approved. Whole. There is a difference. Social approval is conditional. Wholeness is internal. The person seeking approval constantly scans the environment. Do they like me? Did I say something wrong? Am I accepted here? But the individuated person begins asking different questions entirely. Am I betraying myself to maintain comfort? What parts of me only exist for survival? What truth have I been avoiding because acceptance felt safer? Those questions change a human being, painfully, because eventually you begin noticing how often your personality shifts depending on who you are around. Different laugh, different tone, different opinions, different emotional intensity. And then the terrifying thought arrives. If your identity changes in every room, which version is actually you? Most people avoid this question forever. They continue adapting automatically until adaptation becomes identity itself. But beneath all social performance, the psyche remembers. It remembers the anger you swallowed, the opinions you silenced, the ambition you downplayed so others would not feel threatened. The shadow remembers everything, and eventually, suppressed authenticity transforms into quiet resentment toward life itself, not because life betrayed you, because you betrayed yourself repeatedly for belonging. The frightening thing about self-betrayal is that it rarely feels dramatic while it's happening. It feels practical. Small compromises, small silences, small performances. You laugh when something bothers you. You stay quiet to avoid tension. You soften your personality so others feel comfortable around you. At first, it seems harmless, but years later, many people wake up with a strange emptiness they cannot explain. A feeling that their life somehow belongs to someone else, because every suppressed instinct leaves psychological residue. The body remembers what the mouth never said, and eventually the mind begins turning against itself. Anxiety, resentment, emotional numbness, sudden exhaustion around certain people, not random emotions, signals, the psyche trying to warn you that too much of your existence has become artificial. This is why some people feel deeply tired around specific social groups, but strangely alive when alone. Solitude removes performance. For a brief moment, they no longer have to manage perception, no monitoring facial expressions, no calculating responses, no shaping themselves into something digestible, just silence. And in silence, the buried self slowly begins resurfacing. That's why many people fear being alone. Not because solitude is painful, because silence exposes unresolved truth. A distracted mind can avoid itself indefinitely. A silent mind cannot. Jung believed that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And this is exactly what happens in social existence. People unknowingly repeat patterns for decades because they never examine the unconscious fears controlling them. The fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, the fear of becoming unlikable, the fear of outgrowing others, the fear of being seen too clearly, especially that last one, because many people claim they want to be understood, while secretly fearing what authentic visibility would cost them. Real visibility changes relationships. Once you stop performing weakness, certain people disappear. Once you stop seeking approval, some dynamics lose their power entirely. Once you stop over-explaining, manipulative individuals become exposed almost immediately. Because healthy people do not require you to constantly defend your reality. Only controlling people benefit from your confusion. And once you recognize this, something cold begins forming inside you. Not hatred. Discernment. You start noticing how many interactions are built on subtle emotional dependence. How many people only feel secure when you remain uncertain about yourself. How often guilt is used as invisible social control. How frequently society rewards compliance disguised as kindness. The obedient are called good. The self-abandoning are called caring. The exhausted are called dependable. Meanwhile, the person developing boundaries gets labeled selfish. Because boundaries interrupt access. People often confuse love with access to your energy. But access is not love. Control is not love. Possession is not love. Many relationships survive only because one person lacks the courage to become fully themselves. That realization alone can dismantle entire social worlds. Because once authenticity enters a relationship, illusion begins dying, and illusion fights for survival. Aggressively. Most people do not consciously lie about who they are. They simply become addicted to the version of themselves that receives the least resistance from the world. And after enough years pass, they mistake adaptation for identity. But deep down, something inside them always knows. The shadow always knows. And eventually, every unlived truth returns as suffering. Eventually, a person reaches a crossroads most never speak about openly. Continue being understood or become real, because the two often begin separating the moment transformation starts. The authentic self is unpredictable, complicated, contradictory. Society prefers simpler characters, easy people, readable people, manageable people. That is why the world rewards consistency even when the consistency is false. A person who constantly performs agreeableness is considered mature. A person who quietly suppresses resentment is considered peaceful. A person who never confronts others is considered kind. But beneath many socially acceptable personalities lies accumulated emotional decay. And the longer someone avoids confronting it, the more disconnected they become from themselves. This is why certain people suddenly explode after years of silence. Years of adaptation collapse at once. The shadow finally forces itself into consciousness. Jung understood that whatever remains unconscious does not disappear. It accumulates pressure, like water behind a dam, and one day the structure cracks. The terrifying part is that many people never realize how much of their life was built around avoiding disapproval. Even their dreams become edited. They choose careers others respect, relationships others approve, opinions that keep social harmony intact. Not because those choices are authentic, because rejection felt psychologically unbearable, so they trade authenticity for acceptance slowly enough that they barely